Well, the old mate, and I hope I can call him that. Actually, I've been working around this man, Darren Shand, for best part of a couple of decades. The All Black manager is about to step down. He joins us on the program. Welcome to the show, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm great, matey. Thanks. Yeah, good to be here.
Why is it time to leave, Darren?
Oh, I think 20 is a good number, probably. And I kind of got to the end of last year thinking probably be a nice way to finish. My first World Cup was in France in 2007, and this is in France. And I was at that stage in life too where I'm thinking, well, the next job's probably really important for me too. I'm in my mid-50s and still want to keep working. Still got a lot of energy for work, and just got a bit curious really and wanted to try some other things.
Would you stay in the sport kind of side of work?
Yeah, I love being in teams. I love helping people get better. I love the pressure of the high performance end and trying to itch out those little improvements everywhere, every week. But I don't know, I hate using the word, but you get older and everyone says you're a little bit wiser. And so you kind of find that you're good at telling stories now and sharing stuff with people and people want to hear it. So I'm going to take a bit of time to think about what exactly I really want to kind of get this out there and then just commit myself 100% into what's coming up this year, and then take a little bit of time over the summer and figure out what's next.
You've always been wise, mate. Can I pass you a compliment like that? You've always been a wise man, mate.
Yeah, no, it makes you feel really old having people say you're wise.
20 years, mate. 2007, my God. When you became the manager then, the worst exit from a World Cup we'd ever had. What the hell were you thinking? Were you asking yourself that?
Yeah. Well, I started in 2004 with Sir Graham, and it was quite funny. I didn't even know him. I was so scared of him. And I was actually his boss. That was the role that they'd sort of given me. And we sat down for lunch, and I said, "How's this going to work, Ted?" And he said, "Darren, I just want to coach. You sort out everything else." And we shook hands, and we agreed to work together. And Graham's great credit. He brought in like Steve and Smithy and Gilbert was there from the start. So we had a real core of people that have kind of went together for a long period. So It was always like the power of many. And in 07, because of the position that I had, I was actually on the panel interviewing Graham, and we also interviewed Robbie at that stage. And I was proud that the board decided to give Graham another shot. It was terrible, that exit, and I think in hindsight we learnt so much out of that. Like the golden era that followed that was clearly on the back of that. There was so much that we got out of that tournament that we continue to use. And even in 15 when we won, we were still thinking about some of those lessons and not
tapping
letting
back into
ourselves
it.
forget them.
Yeah.
So
it was an awfully divisive time, and I remember being very anti the idea that Ted would keep that job. But in the end, obviously, he got given it and accepted it. And in the end, I was, really confused about the way Robbie was treated and everything else. And these days, you wonder, Darren, don't you, whether or not somebody can lose a World Cup, because of the pressure that's on and that get reappointed. I'm not so sure. But did you have to almost write your own job description over a period of years? Because what you're sort of talking about then, when you became manager, did anyone really know what exactly you were meant to do?
Well, I think when I started, so Jock Hobbs was chair and Chris Moller was the CEO, and they, I guess on the departure of John Mitchell in 03, and the game had sort of grown quite quickly professionally, there was obviously a lot more to it than just the rugby, and so they really wanted to make sure that side of it was functioning well and that the things worked together, they coexisted, if you like. And so that really became the focus, and it's almost now that side of it, like the business side of the game, that would probably be close to 80% of what I do now. Like the actual operational side of the team and getting all that done, that's quite systematic, and we've got good people, and that just, the machine kind of rolls, we're like the big ocean liner, we just start her up and off she rolls, we're not like a little speedboat that can manoeuvre, but we talk about the growth financially and then the expectation of partners that we have now. that managing all of that and making it work seamlessly and not conflicting the team's needs is becoming more and more challenging. So that's probably for me been the biggest shift. Probably the other big ones probably just around like being safe overseas. Like we've lived through that whole era of 9/11 and we go overseas now. I'm kind of thinking of worst case.
Right.
What if that happened? And how would our team deal with that? And so you go to those great cities and you think they're safe, but they're quite different now than 15 years ago. And Paris is very different from when I first went there in 2002, I think. So it's those things sort of keep me up at night more than stuff in early days that used to.
Well, look, a lot of worry and a lot of responsibility, and it leads nicely on to the next question. Darren Shand is with us, the All Black manager who is going to be stepping down after the World Cup. Have you had time to stop and enjoy a lot of this stuff, or does it all kind of just happen around you at the time and you've got so many other things to think about and so many, I's to dot, T's to cross and things, and so many things to make sure this doesn't happen, that doesn't happen? Do you kind of have to enjoy it after it happens?
Oh, no, like you definitely have moments. Like it's such a privilege being inside, and we spend 6 months of the year on the road, and it's kind of your second family. So you get to know people intricately, both the good and the bad. But I've lots of. I think when I look back at the successes, and they're easy, they're medals and tournaments and those sort of things. But just some of the individual experiences, if I can share, like.
Go on, mate. Yeah, please.
Old Ma used to, on a Friday, quite often come into my room and say, "You're working too hard. Come on, let's go. We're going to have a coffee," And moments like that, you just sit down and you hear it from them. Special, like that you can actually just do that. Or a couple of times I remember I was sitting in a hotel in Argentina, and it's a difficult place to tour, and like Ben Smith and Ryan Crotty popped in, and next thing I'm down sitting there having sushi somewhere because we hadn't had a decent feed at the hotel. And those you've got to enjoy, you've got to balance it. I guess the coaches, they put a lot of work in at the start of the week, then they can sort of chill back. But I guess in the management space, you're kind of steady, the workload's constant. But you've got to enjoy it too, like anything. You don't want it to become a chore. And so I've always enjoyed it. I'm a big cyclist, mate, so I take my bike on tour. And so I've managed to explore quite a bit of the world on my bike while we've been away on days off, and that's really cool. So, I've really enjoyed it. I'll miss it. I'm sure I will.
Is there a situation or situations that you'd wished you'd handled differently in hindsight? If you can tell us.
Oh, yeah, plenty. Like, I think one of the things that rugby was poor at initially was trying to cover things up. And in the end, in trying to protect ourselves, we actually lost sight of the person who we were trying to protect. And, I think of the Zach Guildford thing, for example, it was just someone that really needed to be helped, and by covering up, we actually said to him, "It's okay," And
I remember.
He's not the only one. Early in those early days, that was sort of the way. That was the way it was. And I think back to the occasion where it really hit me that we'd done it the right way was with Jimmy Cowan. Where he'd had a few indiscretions, and in the end, he had to sort of really make a decision between the jersey and a beer bottle, really. And on the back of the learnings I'd had with the Guildford case, I really said, "Look, Jimmy, you're going to have to front this. It's your issue. You need to be accountable." And to his credit, he came out on the good side. Which is, you got to go. Sometimes you got to go down the hard road to find the good road. So.
One thing about you, Shandy. Sorry. One thing about you, Shandy, though, is that, and I've always found my experience with you is that. You didn't put the walls up like some did, and some did it at NZRHQ. I don't know whether you're operating independently or not, but you're always approachable. We could always get to you. That didn't mean that we'd get all the information that we wanted, but it wasn't like you gave it the big stiff hand or the big stiff arm. Like a lot of it has happened in the past. So don't beat yourself up too much about that, mate.
No. It's just, mate. It's part of growth, and you're a product of your experiences, aren't you? And so. And you just got to not make the same mistakes twice. So, and I feel like now when I have those sort of issues with players, I actually love. But I've got to be held to account, And
well, just everyone's human.
If you're every day, everyone has to be held to account,
Sure, yeah.
And that's the thing. And so I love that. While that was a something I've had to learn, like so having the courage to have those difficult conversations. I've had some people that are really good at them, like Steve Hampton, so I've had some good mentors in that sense who are not afraid to go into that space. So you find your own way to do it,
How different has it been, and do you have a favourite working from Ted to Shag to Foz? How different are these guys?
All different, eh? Yeah, like the thing I loved about Ted was that he was a pretty experienced coach when he came in, but he was brave enough to hire Smithy and Steve, who were, you could say, as equal as coaches, And what I've learned is that when you can have people pushing you from below, you become better, And so I really admired Ted for that. Like that was huge. And Ted still had his way to some degree, but the fact that he had two individuals there that were really outstanding coaches in their own right was pretty special. Steve, I just loved his, I loved his instinctiveness. He just had a knack. It was almost like a superpower where he could, I remember Smithy would spend hours on the computer after matches analysing it, and Steve would just watch a replay for 10 minutes and have the same answers, and Smithy spent doing the same stuff.
Don't tell Smithy that, mate. Don't tell him that, mate. Don't tell Shag that either, mate.
It was just, he was so good at that. And particularly with people, he had that sort of sixth sense, And Foz, I really admire what Foz has had to go through. Like he couldn't have had a more difficult period of time to have had to deal with all the external stuff, COVID and just everything's just not been normal. And he's held himself remarkably well through all that, and he kept our group together. He's kept us going, and I put my hat to him for that, And I really, I want to stand by him and give him some success that he deserves, this year. So, all very different. And every coach I've worked with, they all. I think I've found with coaches, their upside is unbelievable, Their downside can be really challenging, and there's often a bit of a grey bit in the middle. But that's why you love them, because their characters are so different. And for me, I've got to adapt and learn a different way, and keeps me learning too, So. Yeah.
A couple of more questions. We'll let you go, and I thank you so much for your time, mate. An easy job, a difficult job at times. Is it a 24/7 job? There is no respite when you're doing it. And the sub part of that question is the sacrifices that you got to make. You talk about the privilege of it. We all understand that, but at the same time, you've got to have a life outside of this as well. And has that been difficult?
Yeah, it has. Yeah. It can become consuming because, and I guess I'm part of the problem because I feel such a debt that I owe to it, and that I need to be. I guess I'm one of the leaders, and I need to be present. I need to be available, and I've always taken that pretty seriously. But yeah, it's had an impact personally, and it's certainly had a big impact on my family. But my kids have only ever known me doing this, so they've had a dad that's home 8 months of the year and away 4. So. That's all they think that's normal, but
right.
that ain't normal. So yeah, it's been tough. And I guess like all of us, I've had a couple of years of real tough times myself dealing with it, and I'm really proud I've come out the other end of that. In terms of the depression and the loneliness in the role, and so yeah, I'm pretty excited where I've ended up. I'm actually really grateful for it in a way, and I think my kids they're really proud of what I've done here. They're teenagers now, so they kind of see it, they understand it. So, yeah, I know my extended family, my parents, and my parents are both in their 80s. My dad just loves footy. He couldn't believe the day that he comes to a post-match and gets to meet, Graham Murray and Brian Lahore, and people like that. It's been special for him, and I know he's sitting in the Hawke's Bay really proud. My mum the same. So, yeah, it's cool.
Mate, thank you so much for the time. Just on a personal level, I'm not going to go too far into it, but your sensitivity and your generosity and just your humanity and your friendship over when I was going through some real struggles and tough times, and the messages that you sent and all of that kind of stuff, I always appreciate, mate. I thank you so much for it. You've been a hell of a guy to know and to get to know through this process.
I really, and I'm humbled to hear that, Marty, and. I guess I keep trying to reflect on what this has meant. I think this job's really taught me about we over me, and I know I've got to look after me, but I've got to have the best me to ever be the best best person I can be for this team. So I really appreciate those words, and all power to you, mate. Keep it up.
We'll catch up, mate, and hopefully we're catching up. We've got big smiles on our face in France, dude. Look forward to it.
Yeah, I won't have to say anything there, mate. I'll just be smiling. I can tell you that.
Thank you, Darren. Darren Shand with us, the All Black manager who's stepping down.